Hey everybody, the Bedbug Guy is here. Welcome to my channel. If you want to join my secret society, please subscribe. And it's a secret, otherwise I'd tell you about it. Anyway, I thought I'd do a video. I've done a couple videos where I've talked about these debates between archaeologists and Graham Hancock. And I've got a few comments. Of course, they go both ways. Either they love Graham or they hate Graham, or they love the academic or they can't stand the academic. And everybody's welcome here. As I've said before, I play both sides. If an alternative researcher gets something wrong, I'm going to call them out on it. If an academic is wrong about something, I'm going to call them out too. And after reading some of the comments, I thought maybe I should kind of go over how I feel, in my opinion, Graham Hancock should be debated. How academics can handle these debates. Because especially with the Flint Dibble one, it looked like two siblings going out. Oh, mom, he said this. Dad, he said that. And it wasn't really a debate, in my opinion, so I can't even call a clear winner in that. I know Graham didn't win, and in my opinion, Flint didn't win either. Had he done a couple of things, I would have scored Flint in that. But Flint, just his attitude and the way he handled it, he came off like an a-hole to me, and that's not really what I want to see in this. As far as people to debate Graham, I would like to see some of your very knowledgeable, level-headed Egyptologists debate him, like Dr. Breyer. He's a little long in the tooth. I don't think he'd be able to do it. Or Dr. Lehner, especially about pyramids. He might be able to explain things a whole lot better than Dr. Hawass, and he's still working on the plateau to this day. Maybe Dr. Cooney, but they're not going to engage with Graham Hancock. And quite honestly, I don't think they think it's worth their time. But when you watch these debates and then Graham gets all frustrated and he brings things up, and especially like Flint Dibble just starts talking, and then they start these personal attacks. I want to put forth, in my opinion, the best way to debate Graham Hancock. I'm never going to get to talk to the guy. Just a little stupid guy with a stupid channel, and this is not my living. But let me put forth how this should be done, and let me know what you think. Because part of the problem here is not just Graham Hancock and his line of work, and his basic idea is that there was a advanced civilization during the Ice Age that may have had a global reach, and it was destroyed in the cataclysm, and now he's going with the Younger Dryas impact theory, and that may be possible. But he gets looped in with all these other alternative researchers, the ancient astronaut people and people like Billy Carson, just, and I think it really damages any credibility that he has, just in a guilt by association thing. So let's put it this way. I think any academic that sits down and debates Graham should start with more or less saying that the idea of an advanced civilization during the Ice Age is not out of the question. It really isn't. You can't prove it or disprove it at this point. It's entirely possible. Just say, well, we can't dismiss it, but right now we're not seeing the evidence for it. Okay? I wouldn't go into a debate saying you're completely wrong. There was no civilizations before like 10,000 years ago. Like, modern humans have been around on the earth for what they're saying now about 300,000 years. And to say that critical thinkers didn't show up until about 12,000 years ago seems kind of bizarre to me. In the span of 300,000 years, there could have been several civilizations that rose and fell to one degree of an advancement or another, and we would never know they were here. And even if you found an artifact if you didn't know what you're looking at, you wouldn't be able to say that's what it was. So in my opinion, they should start to say, look, the idea that there's a lost civilization from the Ice Age can't really be dismissed, but at this point it can't be proven. Right. If you do that, then Graham will kind of, okay. So I think that more or less you should just stick to whatever topic that you're a specialist in. And this was evident during the Flint Dibble debate. Flint Dibble is, from what I understand, an expert or the man when it comes to ancient agriculture. And so that's one aspect of Graham's entire body of work. But Graham's entire body of work spans worldwide, okay? Different disciplines, different. So I would say stick with what you know and what you can bring forth the evidence to disprove. Because I'm going to tell you the truth. I've read all of Graham Hancock's stuff. I've consumed his stuff for the last 30 years. I find it extraordinarily interesting. And when I watch his documentaries or watch his interviews or read his books, or these days listen to it in an audiobook, because Graham tells it best, is I can go through what I know and go, and then he'll say something that I know is completely off base, and then I go, and what I've gathered is he either by design or just by the way he operates ignores entire mountains of information surrounding a subject. And he also tends to cite his peers. Okay. So let's say if you have an Egyptologist, he wants to talk about Egypt. You can actually have an Egyptologist who knows what they're talking about, who knows where all this evidence is. And I was hoping Dr. Hawass would be the one on Joe Rogan, but we all know how Dr. Hawass is. Not great for debates like this. Is to go basically just have Graham put forth something and then just say, okay, well, let's talk about that. And I brought this up before when I talked about the pyramidology video. Does any of that make sense? And I actually did two videos because there's a whole other thing that branches from this magic number 43,200 that goes into the coordinates of the pyramid and the shaft lengths equal the speed of light. And the problem is they're all using metric, which wasn't invented till 1790. But in order for Graham to believe that, and he didn't come up with it, he's citing somebody else's work, but he's bought it, okay? He hasn't just studied Egyptology his entire life. He's kind of just looked at what he wants to look at from his point of view and gone, okay, well, this is what happened. And he may have talked to a couple Egyptologists, but not at great length or asked the right questions. But he hasn't really researched it. And I can tell because he says things that if he actually had sat down and gone through it, he wouldn't even believe. One of those is that no pharaoh's body has ever been found in his pyramid. Well, that's not true. There's been a couple whose remains have been found in their actual pyramids. And I did a whole video about were pyramids tombs or not. Well, some were and some weren't. If you really delve into it, you can go, yeah, this one was, and this one clearly wasn't, and here's why they did it, which is why you can say Khufu's pyramid wasn't a tomb, because there's no proof it was. And at the time, people were building pyramids and not even using them as tombs. They were buried elsewhere for whatever reason. But to just have somebody go through subject by subject and then educate him on the facts he's missing, just like the pyramidology, as it's presented, if somebody shows you the math with the metric measurements and the number 43,200, and if you do this, you get pi, and if you do this, you get the circumference of the earth in kilometers, and on paper, if you have no clue about ancient Egypt, it would make sense. It makes sense as it's presented. But you're ignoring an entire mountain of known information. And I'm talking about documentation. And nobody I have ever seen has ever sat down with Graham and gone, hey, look, Graham, I know you think this is engineered by an older civilization, or it wasn't built by the Egyptians. But here's the thing. Dynastic Egypt is very well documented. They wrote stuff down, and we have the documentation. For instance, we know their numbering system. We know how they did math. They had math textbooks from the time. We have a couple of them from different time periods, including the Old Kingdom, and they're virtually unchanged. We know how they figured out volumes of pyramids. We know how they dealt with remainders. They didn't have decimals. We know how they preferred to do math. We know how they did circles, area of circles. It's written down. If you explain to him, hey, look, you're doing these equations in metric. These people did not have a measurement for long distances. Okay, they used royal cubits. They didn't have miles. They didn't have kilometers. They would not have a concept of the circumference of the earth. But I could go on. And in the end, if you factor all of this information in, and then the fact that the pyramid's measurements are in exact royal cubits, and they're not in decimals, in the end, the ancient Egyptians designed the pyramid, and there's nothing encoded in metric in there. But it takes a while. You have to go through every little thing. Here's their number system. Here's the math. Here's what they knew. Here's what they didn't know. Here's what they documented. But I've actually heard somebody mention the metric thing. And even Graham said, well, maybe metric was some sacred knowledge. You can go online and people have tried to prove mathematically that ancient civilizations, somebody must have had metric, because if you go in the king's chamber and measure it diagonally, because the height is off, it isn't even cubits, it comes out to exactly 10 meters. That doesn't mean they knew metric. Coincidental measurements are not evidence of knowledge of metric. My house was built in English feet. I can find metric measurements in here. Coincidental. I've also heard people argue that because you can convert the systems, cubits to metric and back and forth, that's proof. That's not proof, that's an excuse, because if you know measuring systems, you can make mathematical formulas convert anything to metric and vice versa. And I've heard say it, sacred knowledge. Sacred knowledge? Why would a measuring system be sacred knowledge? Why would a measuring system that was highly precise, divisible by 10, not be used by a highly precise civilization that preferred to do their math in tens because of the way their number system was? No mention of sacred measuring systems. Nothing like that. You know, you go to the Egyptian museum, you can find cubit sticks and cubit ropes, and it was standard measurement they used throughout their history. Not to mention, you know, if you look at the ancient Sumerian texts, they are using cubits, so even the Anunnaki weren't giving out metric. But nobody goes through this. You have to sit there and educate him, because he doesn't know it just out of ignorance, that he's just laser focused, or it's quite possible that he just ignores it on purpose. But you have to go through and let's sit down, let him explain it, and say, okay, well, let's go back and look. That's how you win a debate with him, because these are things you can present. You can present things, objects that he can go look at. You want to know how they did math, Graham? Go to the British Museum and look at the Rhind mathematical papyrus. It's only within a few hundred years of the building of the Great Pyramid. You can see exactly how they did math. They were very good at it. As a matter of fact, they invented geometry or trigonometry and algebra, and somehow we give the Greeks credit for that. But they certainly did it. And I think that's how it needs to be going. You have to be level-headed. You can't go on this name-calling thing, even though he's going to do it. He's going to cry conspiracy and then say, everybody accuses me of being a conspiracy theorist. Well, Graham, you have literally said on large platforms that there is a conspiracy in the academic community against you. Why would you say you're not a conspiracy theorist? You literally say it in those words. Now, there may be a conspiracy against you from some academics, but I have no control of that. It's that way in any field. Some people don't like each other. You should see how physicists fight in string theory and regular physicists. They go at each other, and it's not even funny. These people hate each other, but they do respect each other. And I think that's why you have to kind of go in and respect Graham and calmly explain it to him, and be in that frame of mind that he's just not going to agree with you on some things, and he'll literally come out and make a video saying, well, this was all rubbish, like he did with Flint. And in Graham's defense, there were quite a few things that Flint said that don't jive. But I'll leave that between Graham and Flint. So that's the way that you can't come at it that way. And I'm going to tell you what, if you have anybody, if any academic is going to debate anyone, not just Graham, a good litmus test on whether or not you want to talk to these people is if they believe that the 42 emerald tablets of Thoth are real. As far as I know, as far as I'm thinking, and everything I've consumed from Graham, he doesn't mention them or he doesn't cite them. And for me, that's a point in his favor. Because as I pointed out in a video about the emerald tablets of Thoth, if anybody wants to watch it, I go through the whole thing of where this comes from. It literally comes from a fictional book. So anybody who is citing the emerald tablets of Thoth for any information is literally citing a fictional book that was written in the late 1940s. There's no mention of this anywhere before that book. A fictional book. Look it up. It's called The 42 Tablets of Thoth the Atlantean. Trust me. So anybody who's citing that for any reason is citing a fictional book. I wouldn't even debate him. Now, if you really believe in the 42 Tablets of Thoth the Atlantean, you know what? That's fine. You're still welcome on my channel. We're just going to disagree. I can prove it's fiction, but much like other things, if you want to take it on faith, that's up to you. Anyway, let me know what you guys think in the comments. Would you like to see a level-headed archaeologist or Egyptologist really sit down with Graham and not go into name calling and not go into that, but just that's how you win the debate. You present the facts to Graham and show that he clearly has not done his research on maybe that one subject. You got to piecemeal it. You can't have one guy cover the entire topic. You have to have a specialist on Egypt, South America, Amazon, Mayan, Aztecs, Native Americans. Anything that he's talking about, you need a specialist on that one thing. And Flint is the specialist on agriculture. And that's the one thing he really, really nailed Graham on because he knew what he was talking about. The rest of it, kind of not so much. It's just like with doctors. You're not going to send a proctologist in to debate somebody on neurosurgery. The proctologist knows about neurosurgery, but he's not a neurosurgeon and has never done it. Two completely different ends of the body. But if you want to talk about the butthole, that proctologist is going to bury you. So that's the way it is. And, let me know in your comments. I know a lot of you have, and I thank you for it. Positive or negative, I don't mind. Everybody's welcome here. I don't mind trolls. Love the views. Tell me what I should be talking about. I love ancient Egypt, and I love the paranormal too. Paranormal. Except for there's a few channels out there that are already working on that, and I love them to death. I don't want to get in on their stuff. Anyway, thanks for stopping by. Just a quick video. I'm working on a redo, just a regular video about the Sakara bird, because in the beginning I did a live on that. And the live didn't go so well. Just the way my internet was. So I kind of want to redo it as an actual educational video to show you that the Sakara bird is, you'll just have to watch the video. If you want to know what it's about, search back and find that live. But it does go dark through it, so all the stuff I was showing you can't see anyway. Anyway, thanks for stopping by. I'll talk to everybody later. Bye-bye.